Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Thanks for joining me again. If you are new here, please make sure you hit that subscribe button. And yes, welcome to Status of the Nation. So per usual, we break down some of the biggest stories that have been happening not only in South Africa but in the rest of the world. So first things first. There's a lot that's going on in the Republic. There's just way too many different things, but I'm gonna try to break them down as best as I can and hope I give you guys some understanding with what's been going on. So the very first story we're going to talk about, by now I'm sure you guys have heard that Brian Molefe is going to be sworn in as an MP. Now, you guys are obviously aware that Brian used to be the CEO of Eskom, but he resigned when, the state of capture report came out and showed, the very close relationship that he has with the Gupta family and all of that. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but before he went to Eskom, he led the PIC, which is the Public Pension Fund Asset Manager, which is the country's most powerful investor. And obviously before that, he worked at National Treasury. So you can see that, he's held some pretty powerful position. And now he's been sent off to the parliament. Now there's a bit of drama. I mean, what would it be if it wasn't drama? So the ANC in the Northwest basically put Brian forth for nomination, and they stated that he belonged to a branch in Madibeng in the province. Now, the thing is, branch leaders of Ward 29 basically say that they don't have Brian on their books. And by have Brian on their books, I'm assuming that they mean that he's not really like a member of that specific branch. So now, the tea is that allegedly this membership into a branch was kind of fabricated as a way to justify his nomination as MP to Parliament, because people within the party structures are saying that, they don't know him. And even when they look at their party list, he wasn't even on the list for ANC members to be deployed. So they don't know where this is all coming from. An office bearer of the branch told the city press that Brian doesn't have active membership in their branch, and they only found out about it through various statements, I suppose, like everyone else in the media. Now, the reason why the story is so complex is that it involves a number of people, and I have a theory about it. It goes from Pravin right through to our president. So let's start off with the ANC Youth League, which, by the way, I have no idea why people are still giving them room to talk. But anyway, they're basically saying that they want Pravin to go. And the reason they want Pravin to go is they, along with other Jacob Zuma allies, feel like Pravin and the National Treasury is kind of blocking projects that, the president wants to implement and things like that. So they want Pravin to go. Now, there have been talks and there have been rumors, within the ANC corridors that apparently a cabinet reshuffle is coming. But of course, the president has come out to say that that's not true. There's not going to be a reshuffling of any kind, which leads me to my theory, and this is how it goes. My theory is that I don't think Brian is going to be an MP for very long. I mean, consider the fact that the man has been in charge of the PIC, Eskom, and has worked at National Treasury. So he's held pretty big positions, and I feel like to make him an MP is such a junior position, and I honestly don't think that that's where he's gonna stay. Now, I for one don't necessarily think that the president is going to kick Pravin out and replace him with Brian. I mean, if he does that, there's just gonna be a disaster, with our economy and our currency, and there's already a lot that's going on over there, that I don't think that that's what he's gonna do. But chances are, or my theory is rather, that instead of having him as finance minister, he's just going to have him as deputy finance minister. Because you have to remember, Mcebisi Jonas is currently now in the position, and after everything that happened with the Gupta family and so on, he's not really a favorite of the powers that be. He doesn't have as much clout, if you will, like Brian, in terms of all the politics and everything else that goes on in the country, right? So if President Zuma were to make Brian his deputy finance minister, it achieves three things. One, it achieves to irritate Pravin Gordhan. Secondly, it gives the president kind of like ears and eyes at what's going on at Treasury. I mean, the president doesn't have the best relationship with Treasury. Thirdly, Brian, if he becomes Deputy Finance Minister, means that he becomes chairperson of the PIC, which opens up a whole lot of funding. So that's kind of my theory. I don't think that it's ultimately going to be him replacing Pravin Gordhan, but at the same time, I don't think that he's just being brought as MP just to have him as an MP, because that doesn't make sense, considering, his expertise and all the things that he's done. Another thing to consider is that this week, ANN7, the news network that's owned by the Gupta family, they basically went on like an attack, if you will, on Mcebisi Jonas, And I mean, part of it obviously has to be motivated about the fact that, he kind of exposed that they wanted to give him the finance minister job or whatever. And maybe all of that, putting that out into the public, is their way of kind of preparing the ground to say that, he's going to go and he's going to be replaced with Brian. Now, let's not forget, in the state capture report, it details the type of relationship that Brian does have with this family. So it isn't that much of a reach. All I know is that this whole Brian MP and some people in the ANC of Northwest not knowing what's going on, it's a lot of drama, and it's something definitely to watch. My issue ultimately is the timing of everything. I feel like the timing is a little sinister, and something more is going on. It's not just as simple as he's going to be an MP. There's something else that's at work, and I'm hip to it. I'm hip to what's going on. I mean, Pravin just seems to have a lot going on. If it's not this and the whole Brian thing, it's a budget speech that he has to give next week, which, I mean, a lot of people have various opinions about how that's going to go. I mean, considering that the president was talking about radical social economic transformation, or however he worded it in SONA, and in all of this, Pravin has to find the money, and if you look at how our budget has been in money collection, he doesn't really have much room to move around, so he really just has a lot going on. So yeah, next week is going to be very interesting. And so another story that I know you guys are fully aware of that's going on right now is the issue of the banks and them regulating and manipulating the currency. It's the big story about what's going on, and that basically it comes down to how the banks were manipulating the currency and basically not reflecting it at its true value, right? So it involved local banks and international banks as well. So local banks that are involved are Absa, Investec, and Standard Bank. Now, from what I read, Absa and Investec aren't going to be liable for the fine. They're not going to be liable for the fine. And the reason being that they are cooperating with the whole investigation, so that's why they're not going to be liable. I also read that Citigroup and Barclays are also not going to be liable because apparently they're also cooperating. So it basically is just a bunch of people who struck deals to say that, because of this and this and that, they're not going to be liable for what is about. So the issue of the banks really comes down to two questions. What did they do and how did they do it? Okay. So in terms of what they did is that they manipulated the price of bids and offers through an arrangement that basically refrained them from trading and therefore creating fictitious bids and offers at a particular time. So that's basically what they did. How they did it kind of plays down in a couple of steps, and we're going to break it down. So how they did it, so this is one of the ways in which they did it, in that they maximized profits or they avoided losses. So these 7 traders, what they basically did is that they posted non-existent bids and offers. What this did is that it pushed up or down the prices of bids and offers. This then helped them basically boost their profits or reduce their losses by cashing in on the difference, right? And that difference is basically called a bid-offer spread. Another way is that they fixed the bid-offer spread. So the traders agreed on the size of the bid-offer spread charged to customers for certain volumes of currencies exchanged. So that means that the larger the size of the spread, the more money dealers made at the expense of the customers. It's all very complicated, but that's pretty much how they did it. So another way that they did it is agreeing to fix the price of the bids and the offers, and this is how they did that. They shared confidential customer information, right, including order information, which means they would share information about whether the customer planned to split a large order for dollars or rands into various small orders between different dealers, right? So sharing this information enabled these dealers to quote the same price to a customer, theoretically enabling one to offer a discount compared to other dealers. So the last way they did this is basically to coordinate how all of these trades would happen, basically in terms of time. So what they would do is that they would refrain certain trades from happening while letting others go through. So for example, if a trader had a large account, they would let that trader sort of go first so that it wouldn't drive the price up or down. And then the smaller ones, the smaller traders would then go after. This was obviously unfair to the customers because they couldn't then get an advantage of the higher price. That's basically how I understand how this whole banking thing kind of went down. And the more I think about it, I feel like it's more of personal gain. You know, it sounds like it was a lot of these traders, you know, doing it for their own personal gain. I'm not saying that the bank is in no way responsible for this, because I do believe that there is a level of responsibility, because the traders are the traders and they should have been, you know, aware of what they're doing. That's why we have regulators and all of those things. But the driving force behind all of this, in my honest opinion, is greed. That's honestly what it comes down to. And one of the recommendations that the report made was basically to say that these banks are going to be charged a 10% turnover, a 10% on their annual turnover. Now, whether or not this is enough, I don't know. You know, whether or not this is justice in the face of what's happened, I don't know. But what I do know is whenever things like this happen, you know, in the financial sense, there never is any real deep consequences. What I found incredibly insulting and ridiculous was some economists were talking about how the South African government must be careful about how they deal with this whole thing because, you know, they don't want to scare away investors. I'm like, it's ridiculous, right? That these banks and their traders can effectively, you know, break the rules and go rogue, and yet the government must be careful on how they deal with the situation because of investors. It makes no sense. And if anything, investors should be afraid of the standard banks and the ABSAs and all of these banks because they're the ones who have dodgy practices. And I personally, for one, am tired of, you know, the whole investors thing being used as a way of like controlling how we react and respond to things. It's always like, don't do that, you're gonna scare the investors, don't do that. The fact that, you know, we have to be kept in our place because investors, I almost feel like that whole entire thing is played out. So it wouldn't be a status of the nation without talking about Donald Trump. I mean, right now, he quite possibly is one of the most interesting presidents. I mean, our president is fairly interesting. And of course, you've got Grace Mugabe saying all kinds of things, you know, about Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe. But I feel like Donald Trump right now still has everybody's attention. So what's the latest in Donald land? Well, I saw a headline, which when I first saw it kind of had me confused, because it was talking about how Donald is on a campaign rally. He's having an event. And I was like, campaign? He just won the presidency and he's been president for 4 weeks. What is he possibly campaigning for? So I don't know if you guys are aware, but on the day of his inauguration, Donald Trump filled out paperwork with the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, basically signaling his intent to run for president in 2020. Now let's just stop right there. How are you gonna be inaugurated as president and on that day go fill out the paperwork to say that you're ready for your re-campaign? Like, I don't understand what that's all about. And I remember when I read that, I was like, I wonder what the reasoning behind that is. Now, on the filing itself, Donald Trump does say that he doesn't constitute this as a public or a formal announcement. But what this basically does is that it allows him to collect donations, right? So let's look at standard practice in terms of previous presidents. So let's look at what, you know, the presidents before Donald have done in terms of this. So when Barack Obama filed his papers for re-election, he filed them in April of 2011, something like 19 months before the 2012 elections. And then George W. Bush, he didn't file his papers till 2003, something like 18 months before the 2004 elections. So it's not that it's strange, right? Because it appears that, you know, presidents generally tend to wait 2 years after they've won to have no active campaigning, no active fundraising. And then a little 2 years before the new election, that's when they run again. So to have Trump be doing this a whole 4 years before, it's, I don't know, when I read it, I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. And again, by doing this, it helps, you know, him collect money. So it means that there's always going to be money that is flowing in. And also, who's to say that after he's done all of this, he ends up running again? So for these 4 years, you know, that he's campaigning and having these rallies, he collects all these monies, and then come 2020, he's like, no, thank you. Like, I don't know, something about it is just very sinister. Again, there isn't a rule that says that you can't do it. It's just a little strange that right after you win, you're already campaigning for the next one. You haven't even done anything in these 4 years that's going to have people saying, okay, we're going to vote for you again. But it's a clever way to be collecting money. So there's that. There's a draft memo that basically says that the Trump administration wants to send out 100,000 National Guard troops to basically round up immigrants and undocumented people in the United States. But yeah, that's what's happening in Trump land. I saw this tweet that basically, you know, kind of signals that it has already started way in some areas. But yeah, guys, that is basically the status of the nation. There is a lot that's going on. I mean, not only in our country, you know, if it's not, you know, the whole banking thing, if it's not Pravin and whatever drama he's got going on, then it's the whole Brian thing. Which again, this whole Brian thing, it still makes no sense to me, because if you really think about it, to avoid this drama, why didn't ANC Gauteng nominate him? Why did it have to be the Northwest? Like, nothing about that makes sense. Also, it's the same Northwest that's out here trying to build a statue for Jacob Zuma, which I'm like, why? And it's a statue that is going to cost something like 6 million rands. Million rands. And then you had the premier trying to justify talking about, no, it's going to create jobs and this and this. I'm stuck on the how. How is this statue supposed to be creating jobs for people? Not when there are people in the province of Northwest in certain areas who are struggling to even get like proper drinking water. Do you know what I mean? Like, I saw this on Twitter and I'm like, are you kidding me? There are people who struggle with water, and yet 6 million is gonna go to the statue. I don't know, I feel like the Northwest has a whole bunch of stuff that they've got going on that has me very confused, you know. And then of course you've got Donald Trump over here, and he's doing his own thing. He's campaigning, but he's talking about voter fraud, and now he's got the army rounding up people. There's just a lot that's going on in the world. And I almost want to say that, like, I feel like right now it's important that we don't get distracted, because there's a lot of different things that are happening here at home, you know, trying to distract us. And even in the States, there's nothing wrong with being caught up in the noise, you know, but it's also important to recognize the noise for what it is when it serves as a distraction. There's a lot that's going on, and it requires our constant attention, because before you know it, things are going to happen, things are going to change, and we're going to be surprised and shocked because we can't believe that this has been happening. But yes, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys for watching. Please make sure you thumbs up this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and please comment and let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Bye.